to Independent Green Party, Green TV. I'm Kerry Campbell, Independent Green Party.
I'm Brooklyn Kinley with the Independent Green Party. Independent Green Party, Green TV focus is Independent Green Party candidates for local, state, and federal offices.
Green Party, Independent Green Party, Green TV focus is positive, Green New Deal, eco-jobs.
Party solar jobs, wind jobs, geothermal jobs.
Green Party insulation jobs, conservation jobs, and weatherization jobs.
Green Party rail jobs, building walkable, bikeable, pedestrian, and rail-friendly communities.
Green Party, Green TV is about positive Green Party, Green New Deal, eco-jobs for the economy.
The Independent Green Party local, state, federal, and presidential candidates offer positive eco solutions. Eco-capitalism. Prices must tell the environmental truth. A green industrial revolution means jobs. They cut taxpayer subsidies to zero for fossil fuels, big oil, and auto.
The Green Party has recognized Green Party candidates seeking the Green Party nomination for president. The Green Party is one of only 4 truly national political parties in the United States. The Independent Green Party of Virginia is the most successful on-ballot third party in Virginia in 100 years.
3 recognized Green Party presidential candidates are Dr. Kent Mesplay, a Native American Indian and a scientist. Green Party candidate Siddhanam Curry is a public relations professional, and Dr. Jill Stein. All the Green Party candidates seeking the Green Party nomination for U.S. presidents are veteran Green Party candidates for local, state, and or federal offices. Today's Green Party focus is Green Party medical doctor Jill Stein. Stein gives a lecture at perhaps the world's most famous debate hall, the Oxford Union. It is an Oxford University in the United Kingdom. This is Dr. Jill Stein's Green Party video.
So thank you all so much. It's really such an honor to be here, and I greatly appreciate this invitation. I had not previously been to England or to London before, so it's wonderful to be here in the land of the Magna Carta and at this wonderful union that has been such a bedrock of free speech and open debate. And I only wish that the governments of the world would take a lesson from you and hold some open debates themselves. This would be a great improvement in my own country. And it's wonderful to be here to talk about my campaign and about the US elections, because what's taking place over there is really taking place everywhere in one fashion or another. And so I think it's very interesting for us to talk about this more broadly, and it'll be interesting for me to hear your perspective on this from across the ocean and also from across the generations, because the more I think we grapple with this, the more effective we will be in becoming a stronger force for change. And I just want to say that this struggle, which is sort of under the surface of the election, you know, when you look at the election, it's a farce and it's a caricature. It's a mockery of democracy. And, you know, people scoff at it and laugh at it because it is indeed, you know, it is a travesty. But at other levels, there are very real dynamics that are playing out there in which basically everything is at stake. Our democracy, our civilization, the prospects for life on the planet itself. These are all very much imperiled by the current regime of corporate rule and its consequences, meaning climate change and endless war, the 6th great extinction, the attack on the rights of immigrants, and so on. So these are very important things, and it's wonderful to be here discussing them, especially with a younger generation, because real change always depends, as you know, and is always really driven by the actions and the clear vision of a younger generation, the fresh vision that you bring to the world. And what's at stake now is not only social change, it's potentially the future of humanity on the planet itself. So no pressure, but anything I can do to help, and I really see that as the reason for my being here tonight, is to help fan those flames of transformation and fan the flames in that spirit of rebellion, of peaceful rebellion, on which our future depends. So, with that, let me just thank you first for being a part of this very historic moment that we're in, when this movement for democracy and justice really is sweeping the planet. And in my country, it's living wage campaigns, it's fossil fuel blockades and lockdowns, it's the anti-austerity protests, it's the fight of the dreamers for immigrant rights, it's the fight to make Black Lives Matter. In all of these ways, and far beyond the US, this is really a global phenomenon that people are rising up like we haven't seen for generations. And in my country and in my campaign, we are calling for not only a world that works for all of us, but an America that works for all of us, because the world isn't going to work very well with America continuing to play the role that it is. And the other way around as well. We cannot have an America that works for Americans, that depends on exploiting and preying upon the resources and the people and the economies of other countries as well. So we need a holistic solution that works for everyone and a world that works for all of us. As you know, we are facing really unprecedented crises across the domains of our economy, ecology, peace, and democracy. So we're not going to solve this around the margins. We really need transformative solutions and a new way forward based on democracy, justice, and human rights. A way forward that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. And that's not going to come from corporate political parties, that is, the parties that are being funded by predatory banks, by fossil fuel giants, by war profiteers, and the likes. It will come from we the people, mobilized as a mass social movement with an independent voice of political opposition, not inside the box, outside the box, and opposing the box. Because in the words of Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. And we must be that demand. It won't happen without us. In the US, and I presume here as well, we're told that we're in a recovery, but in fact, for most people, it's still an emergency. Good jobs have been lost and replaced by part-time and temporary jobs, which are at an all-time high right now. Average workers' wages are barely above the poverty level in the US. Household wealth has been just dramatically slashed by 40% compared to before the 2008 crash. An entire generation is locked in debt from which there is no escape, predatory student loan debt. The Black Lives Matter campaign is fighting for the lives of Black people that are truly on the firing line, and immigrants are looking at the potential for mass deportation out of the US. Meanwhile, wars for oil are blowing back at us catastrophically, and the climate meltdown is threatening the very civilization that our lives really depend on. And you may be familiar with recent climate science coming out of Jim Hansen's work in the US that demonstrates that the ice sheets are not simply going to melt slowly, they are going to break up. And the question is when they are going to break up, but the thinking now is that that could be as soon as 50 years from now. We used to think this would be millennia away, that we had to worry about dramatic rise in sea level. But now we know it's potentially just a few decades away. And we're looking at 10, 20, 30 feet of sea level as the first two major ice sheets, Greenland and the West Antarctic ice sheets, begin to break up. And they're in the process of doing that right now. So this is not something that we can put off. We need to move on this. Meanwhile, the super rich are richer than ever.
You are watching Green Party Green TV. Back to the Green Party's Dr. Jill Stein lecture at the famed Oxford Union in a moment.
The biggest way people give up power is by not knowing that we have it to start with. Well, we've got it, and we're going to use it. And it doesn't come from the big corporate political parties that are bought and paid for by Wall Street. Their choices are not our choices. Their candidates are not our candidates. Their economy is not our economy. Their government is not our government. Their prisons are not our prisons. Their police are not our police. And their endless wars are not our wars. And their recovery for the few is not our recovery. The 1% is quaking in their boots because we're waking up to the fact that we have the power and we're going to use it. We have the power to make the minimum wage a living wage. We have the power to turn the tide on climate change. We have the power to create a welcoming path to citizenship. We have the power to end the racist war on drugs. It's in our hands. Together, we can build a world that puts people and the planet and peace over profit. That's in our hands. Our power to create this new world. It's not in our hopes. It's not in our dreams. It's in our hands. Thank you.
This is Green Party Green TV.
Now back to Dr. Jill Stein's Green Party lecture at the world's famous Oxford Union.
The super rich are richer than ever. You may know the recently revealed statistic that 62 billionaires now, most of which are in the US, hold the wealth of half of the world's population, the equivalent of what 3.5 billion people have. This is not a sustainable future. And the super rich collaborate with the economic, the political elite, I should say, and what they do is only making things worse. Our governments are not helping us, they are actually hurting us, imposing austerity on most people while they squander trillions of our tax dollars on Wall Street bailouts, on wars for oil, and tax favors for the wealthy. So it's no surprise that people are in revolt in the US and elsewhere around the world. People are in revolt. And we see that in the polls of the American electorate, where now for the first time, 50% of Americans now have rejected the Democratic and Republican parties. You don't hear this. You're led to believe that these two parties are the big gorillas. They're not. Republicans now represent 21% of the American electorate, and Democrats represent 29%. This is according to the most recent Wall Street Journal poll, which was this past summer. So it's the near majority. It's half of the electorate now. This is the largest group of voters and potential voters who've actually rejected this system, and we see it in opinion polls on issues as well, where the progressive agenda has supermajority support on issue after issue, from cutting the military to treating health care as a human right, to establishing the right to a job, even if that means a government job. And the good news is that we actually have the power to turn this around. The American people are in the revolt, but what many don't know is that we actually do have the potential to turn this around. The minute we actually stand up with the courage of our convictions. because we not only reflect the visions and the values of the American people, but as a broad coalition, we actually have the numbers that it takes to win the day. Now, how's that exactly? You may be thinking, well, consider this number, 43 million. That's the number of young people who are actually locked into student debt. And that 43 million is the plurality of a vote. That is a winning number in a three-way race for president. And this is actually going to be a four-way race. And in fact, it may be a five or a six-way race if Trump runs independently and if Michael Bloomberg joins the race as well. So this could be an electorate that's divided up in many ways, in which young people who are in debt have a very commanding majority of those votes. So we do have the numbers to turn this around. And the trick is basically getting the word out, because if millennials learn that they can come out on November 8th and actually cancel their debt by checking the green box, they can do that because there's only one candidate that supports canceling student debt. And you're looking at her right now. The other campaigns, most of them now talk about free public higher education. In the last race, I was the only candidate advocating for that. They've caught up on that count, but they haven't caught up on student debt. So if young people actually get the word out that they can come out and take over this election, they can actually do that and not only abolish student debt, but actually bring the whole agenda of justice, racial justice and economic justice and ecological justice that goes with that too. So there really is a path forward if we get the word out about it. So the bottom line is that we do have the power to change our direction going forward. In the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. And what the student debt numbers show is that we actually do have the power, not only to cancel student debt, but to make public higher education free, which it should be. Few people know this, the fact that it actually pays for itself. Is that a statistic you're familiar with? A lot of people haven't heard that, but back after the Second World War, in the US, we had a GI Bill that paid for higher education for all the returning soldiers, and what we found was that for every taxpayer dollar that was put into it, we got back $7 in revenues and other public benefits. So it enormously pays for itself many times over. And it's the right thing to do because it's essential for young people to be launched into a secure economic future in the same way that a high school education was in the 20th century. A college education is now a necessity in the 21st. So by analogy, it should be free and it can be free. We can also solve, the biggest challenges in front of us right now, that is the climate crisis and the economic crisis, and the entire environmental crisis that goes with that. They're really of a whole. We have to solve those two problems together, of the economy and our ecology. So we're proposing that we actually fix it. We have the power to do that, and again, this pays for itself, and I'll tell you how in a minute. But we're calling for a Green New Deal. So everybody knows about the New Deal that got the US out of the Great Depression. Well, so this is not just like a hypothetical. This isn't some pie-in-the-sky idea. This has been done. This works. We're calling for a new deal, but now a green one, so that it fixes, in addition to the economy, it also fixes the climate crisis, which is an emergency. Specifically, we call for 20 million living wage full-time jobs that transition us on an emergency basis. And we're calling for a wartime level mobilization to do this. And these jobs would essentially green our energy system, our food system, and our public transportation at the same time that they restore infrastructure, critical infrastructure, including ecosystems, because soil and water and fisheries and the climate. You know, these are absolutely critical to our lives, to our health, to the economy. So this is part of what we would fix in a Green New Deal. And we would do it in a time frame that would actually fix the crisis. So we call for 100% renewable energy by 2030. That is in time to actually stop the climate meltdown. And in addition, we would implement an immediate ban on all new fossil fuel infrastructure and exploration so that we can actually jumpstart this. And I'll just make one other point here, that when the Second World War, when the US first joined the Second World War, and it began for us with the bombing of Pearl Harbor, we declared an emergency and we transformed our economy in 6 months from 0% GDP in wartime production to 25% GDP. So we can create an economic transformation when we have an emergency. And the emergency we're facing with climate change makes Pearl Harbor look like small potatoes. We're not talking about the destruction of one harbor. We're talking about the destruction of all harbors, all across the world, and all population centers, which are generally on coastlines. So we think we have an immigration crisis right now, an immigrant crisis right now. It doesn't hold a candle to what we're looking at if we allow this climate catastrophe to go forward. And if we're going to stop it, we have to do it now.
Back to the Dr. Jill Stein Party lecture at the Oxford Union in a moment. Want to be part of the positive, independent Green Party solution? The Independent Green Party and Green Party recruits candidates for local, state, and federal office year-round. Independent Green contacts are the Independent Green Party webpage at www.votejoinrun.us.
Excellent. And in Virginia, people can call the Independent Green Party at 703-351-1235. That's 703-351-1235. Or email the Independent Green Party State Chairman Joe Odo at usrepublic@aol.com. You can also check out the Independent Greens YouTube channel on YouTube at Independent Greens, or contact the Independent Green Party on Facebook.
Now back to the
Green Party president means an end to unemployment, to foreclosures, to student debt, to climate change, and an end to corporate rule. We're not talking spare change. We need a revolution. That's what we deserve. What we don't deserve is pandering, irresponsible bullshit that passes itself off as campaigning. I can't believe I just said that, but that's how I feel.
I'm voting for Jill Stein! Vote for Jill Stein!
We need a green president.
Vote for Jill Stein.
We need a Green Party president!
That does it. I'm voting for Jill Stein.
We need Jill Stein for president.
Vote for Jill Stein!
I'm Jill Stein, Green Party candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Now back to the famed Oxford Union and Dr. Jill Stein's Green Party Green New Deal at a lecture to a packed crowd.
And for us, with the bombing of Pearl Harbor, we declared an emergency and we transformed our economy in 6 months from 0% GDP in wartime production to 25% GDP. So we can create an economic transformation when we have an emergency. And the emergency we're facing with climate change makes Pearl Harbor look like small potatoes. We're not talking about the destruction of one harbor. We're talking about the destruction of all harbors, all across the world, and all population centers, which are generally on coastlines. So we think we have an immigration crisis right now, an immigrant crisis right now. It doesn't hold a candle to what we're looking at if we allow this climate catastrophe to go forward. And if we're going to stop it, we have to do it now, which is why we're saying this is an emergency that calls for transformative policies, but also a transformative politics that doesn't, that doesn't shrink from the task at hand, that really understands this is more important than You know, some will say, oh, the Supreme Court, you know, you can't vote green because then you're going to worry about your next Supreme Court appointment. Well, hello. You know, we're not going to have a court system. You know, we're not going to have a judicial system. We're not going to have a civilization over which a Supreme Court is going to survive unless we really take dramatic steps right now. And I should mention what this plan does, the Green New Deal. It not only revives the economy, it turns the tide on climate change, but importantly, it also makes the friggin' wars for oil obsolete. Because you can't justify wars for oil anymore if you have complete energy security and independence, which the Green New Deal will achieve. So because you don't need the friggin' military at that level, and we call for cutting it by 50%, you have all the money you need to pay for this transformation. The U.S. now pays $1 trillion when you add it all up across many departments, $1 trillion a year on the military. And it's not exactly making us safer. We'll come to that in just a second. So, you know, this is a win-win all around. We get to cut that money in half, put our dollars actually into true security here at home. And the payoff here is not only in the military expenditures that are averted, but it's also our health care. Believe it or not, the Green New Deal could be paid for purely in its health benefits alone. And this, again, is not widely known. It's kind of a well-kept secret. But there are all sorts of studies, engineering studies, that show when you reduce pollution basically to zero, which is what happens here, when you eliminate fossil fuel pollution and the other downstream poisons that result from fossil fuels, you basically improve health so much in terms of cancers and asthma and heart disease and strokes and so many things that are related to fossil fuel pollution. That gets so much better. We save so much money, it pays for the transition itself.
Dr. Jill Stein's Green Party. That's this edition of Independent Green Party Green TV. Watch Green TV again next week for more of Dr. Jill Stein's Green Party Green New Deal lecture at the Oxford Union. I'm Brooklyn Kinley, Independent Green Party.
Great job, Brooklyn. Great to be working with you, as always.
Thank you.
I'm Kerry Campbell. We want to thank Gail Farrell-Parker. Gail Farrell-Parker, the producer and director of Green Party Green TV, today directed by Philip Helfenbein. Thank you both for all the outstanding work you do, and thank you for watching. We look forward to seeing you again next time on Green Party Green TV.